Hi everybody, I hope you are doing well. This is an introductory video to applied linguistics. It aims to give a general view of what applied linguistics is, its scope, and the major ideas behind this field and the concepts that are studied and used in this field of study. So first, let's start with an introduction. We'll talk about the nature. In this slide, we'll talk about the nature and the scope of applied linguistics. The term applied linguistics came into existence in the 1940s through the efforts of teachers who wished to ally themselves with scientific linguists and to dissociate themselves from teachers of literature. By the mid-1950s, the term was given credence by the opening of the School of Applied Linguistics at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland and by the creation of the Centre for Applied Linguistics in the United States. Finally, in the 1970s, the field was given scope and substance by the publication of Introducing Applied Linguistics by Spitcorder in 1973. So, basically, the field came into existence by teachers who wanted to be more scientific, who wanted to use the scientific tools of the field of linguistics, the general field of linguistics, since the field of linguistics is very scientific. It uses things like spectrograms, as we saw in phonology and phonetics. Phonetics. It uses scientific tools taken from the hard sciences, as well as the so-called soft sciences like psychology, as we saw in psycholinguistics, and sociology, as we saw in sociolinguistics. So, because there is this idea that science is better or harder than literature and poetry and stuff like that, people tend to want to incorporate as many scientific tools and concepts into their work as possible. So teachers in the 1940s decided to take this step, and they looked to the scientific, the field that studies language in a scientific manner, and they took the concept from that and used them to come up with tools to teach language better, to make language teaching and learning better and easier. So it started from there. And of course, before that, language teaching was basically done through literature, through what we call the grammar translation method, where if you wanted to teach a language, for example, Latin, classical languages like Latin, you take poetry and you make your students, if you are a teacher, a classical teacher, a traditional teacher. We had this in 19th century and up to 1940s, as it says here. Teachers used poets, Latin poets like Ovid, and Greek poets like Homer. They made their students translate those texts, those literary texts, into their native language and vice versa. They used their native language they used texts from their native language and they translated them into the target language. By target language, I simply mean the language that you are trying to study or teach. For example, if you are studying or teaching English, English is the target language. In this case, Latin or Greek are the target languages, since they are classic languages that were given a lot of focus in Great Britain. So from there emerged this traditional method of teaching, and it spread all over the world. And in fact, to this day, it's still being used. But with the advance of applied linguistics, that there was a great change in language teaching methodology and pedagogy, meaning that the way languages were taught after the 1940s changed greatly, because we are now using the tools of applied linguistics to study language, and we are using things like meaningful learning. We being teachers and people who are interested in this field, we started discarding rote learning or memorization, which was one of the main methods of language teaching before the 1940s, before the advance of applied linguistics. And it says here, finally in the 1970s, the field was given scope meaning broadness, and substance meaning importance and value, by the publication of Introducing Applied Linguistics by Speech Corridor. This is a textbook that introduces applied linguistics. Okay, so Kaplan, another linguist, has stated that applied linguistics is a difficult notion to define. Kaplan, Lillis, and O'Halloran similarly emphasize that there has been a good deal of debate about the scope and nature of applied linguistics. Recently, however, a certain degree of consensus seems to have been achieved. They quote Blomfitt that applied linguistics is concerned with the theoretical and empirical investigation of real-world problems in which language is a central issue. Nevertheless, in Kaplan's words, applied linguists have repeatedly argued that their field is not merely applied, linguistics applied, but rather is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, meaning that applied linguistics takes from different fields takes from different fields to expand its horizons and to basically make the job of solving real-world problems in which language is a central issue easier and more effective. Now let's back off a bit and start. Let's see. This is one of the greatest definitions of applied linguistics. Applied linguistics is the theoretical and empirical investigation of real-world problems in which language is a central issue. Wherever there is a problem, and language is the main issue. For example, speech impediment. If you're trying to help someone who has a speech impediment, if you're trying to help someone become a better communicator, if you are trying to teach someone a new language, if you are trying to make computers understand and produce language, then you are doing. Then that is the domain, the scope, the dominion of applied linguistics. That's the field of applied linguistics. It is both empirical and theoretical investigation, meaning that we are theorizing, writing books, doing research, studying phenomena, advancing theories, coming up with concepts, and we're also doing groundwork, practical work, empirical investigation through it can be anything from helping someone learn a language practically, face to face, to helping someone speak better, which is speech therapy. People who have a degree in applied linguistics can go into a field called speech therapy, where they help people speak, especially people who stutter, people who have a hard time expressing themselves due to a genetic problem or a progenital problem, a problem that they had since birth, or stress or social anxiety or things like that. So applied linguists are very, very well qualified to do that, to go into speech therapy. Okay, now next slide is an overview. Interest in language and language teaching has a long history, and we can trace this back at least as far as the ancient Greeks. By the way, applied linguistics is not only about language teaching, that is clear. Applied linguistics is more than, but one of the central things that applied linguistics focuses on is language teaching and learning, whether it be the learning and teaching of a second language or a first language. But as I said, one of the main things that we focus on in applied linguistics is language teaching and learning, and that's very practical. And so far as the practicality of study,